So if you're like most people, when you get a laser, you're eventually going to want to do some tile engraving, and the results can be kind of hit or miss depending on the process you use. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I do, and I'm going to show you how to make one of these. And it's actually really easy, and I won't use the traditional method I'm sure you've seen on many other channels. So with that, let's get started. Hey, it's Steve here. Welcome back to the workshop, and welcome to another project video, or at least the techniques to build a project. So if you've seen some of the many videos out there on how to do tile engraving with a diode laser, they typically all start the same way. They start with a 50-cent piece of tile, and then they will take a can of white spray paint and they will spray coat the tile, and with that they can then plunk it under their laser and do some engraving. And that's the easy part. The hard part with that technique is there's another project within the project, and that's the pain and misery of trying to get something that was designed to be permanent scraped off your tile, and you have a really big job when you do that. So what makes white spray paint actually work on ceramic tile for engraving is something called titanium dioxide. Now, the good thing is this is food grade, it doesn't impact the environment, and you can buy it cheap on Amazon. And in addition to that, you also need a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, and I'm using 99% here. Because titanium dioxide is a powder and we really need to be able to spray it onto a tile, we have to mix it up. So this stuff is food grade, which is good, but you'll still notice that gloves are necessary. The powder here is so fine it gets everywhere. So all I do is take just some arbitrary amount, and you'll hear people say measure 1 to 1, 2 to 1. It doesn't matter, honestly. Pour the powder in, then pour in some alcohol and give it a mix. The alcohol does nothing here but carry the material onto the tile, and then it evaporates away. So the concentration here is irrelevant. And when you mix it up and give it a shake, then you can pour it into a spray bottle. And again, you'll hear people talk about the importance of a fine mist. Ultimately, as long as you can get a smooth coat, the bigger, thicker glob you can get, the better, because you don't want to have to spray too much of this stuff. It just, as I said, gets everywhere. But inevitably, you will spill this stuff. A drop goes here or there. And you'll notice here I had 2 minor drops on my green grid. And you touch it with a paper towel and it's just suddenly 10 times the size. But a little alcohol or water actually will clean it up with some paper towel. Next, I need to prepare the tile. So what I normally do, just because this stuff is a bit messy, is lay down a couple of sheets of parchment paper on my mat just to keep it clean. And I build a little bit of a backstop there so that this overspray doesn't get everywhere else. And after that, I'll just drop the tile on, and you will hear some people say, spend some time and clean it. In reality, I don't think it matters a whole lot, since the material that we're spraying on, this titanium dioxide, isn't actually sticking, it's just sitting on the surface. But I'll give it a bit of a squirt with some alcohol and a quick rub, and you can do the same if you really want to. And then finally, I'll take my sprayer and spray the tile with a good even coat. Don't be shy here. Once the alcohol evaporates, the surface will dry fairly flat. Now you may need a second coat. I tend to put 2 coats on. Usually the second one is a bit thinner. And then you just wait for it to dry. So the material's prepared, and what do we do now? Well, you can certainly do a gradient test, and I've done one here. I've actually done a couple of them to kind of hone in on the power. And these will work. What you're looking for here is something that comes to, a nice even power increase over the range as much as possible, and that's the one you'll probably select. But at the end of the day, a lot of this depends on the thickness of the coating you laid down. So, thicker coating needs more power. So sometimes you may just have to experiment, and that's typically why I will always make at least 2 tiles when I lay these down, and you'll probably end up doing the same thing. And the final step here before we actually engrave this is to select an image to engrave. And keeping with my Warner Classic Cartoon theme, I've chose Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. and I've set it to a size that will fit within the tile with reasonably accurate border of 10-15 millimeters. And because I'm using my X-Tool 40-watt laser, I can go fairly quickly on these because it's got ample power. So I've set it at 11,000 millimeters per minute with a maximum power of 90 and a minimum power of 12. And the reason I picked that minimum power is because when I ran a gradient test on this in the past, I didn't see a whole lot of laser activity below about 10%, so there's really not much point in letting the power drop below, say, 12. So that's it. I'll shoot this over to the laser, and we'll come out with something, hopefully, that looks good. So I'm going to lay down one of the tiles that I coated, and I'm using it on my workbench here, so I have the air on the laser turned off because I don't want to risk blowing any of the material off. It's not really stuck to the tile, it's just kind of sitting there. And then I start the engrave, and I've sped it up here about 15 times, but you can see how it's coming out. It actually looks pretty good. Now, I did try to do a grayscale here, so the results, I like doing these live kind of tests. The results might vary here. We'll see what it looks like in the end, but certainly on the material there, it looked okay. Engraving's finished here, and you can see it looks really good before I clean it. We'll see what it looks like after. Now, I don't have running water in my workshop here, so I'm just using a spray bottle, but you could easily just run this under a tap. Either way, you see as soon as I touch it with water, it just cleans it right up. And the final results here look pretty stunning. You can see the Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote turned out fantastic. And I did an extra bonus one here. I did this lighthouse. And I took advantage of the X-Tool D1 Pro 40 watt, which can do proper grayscale. So you can see the results here actually look pretty good. Certainly Marvin the Martian, when I took more time and spent a lot more time preparing the material, it worked really well. This process works at least as good as it would for white spray paint. What you don't have is that heavy-duty cleaning process at the end where you've got to scrub that paint off that was really intended to be permanent. So the cleanup is a breeze. Now, there are some downsides here, of course. It is a powder and you have to mix it. So there's some challenges around safety. I certainly wore gloves and a respirator. Now, this, by all accounts, is an inert material. Now, it depends which government you believe. The EU thinks this material could be a possible, quote, possible carcinogen, specifically because of the nanoparticles in it. It's very, very fine dust. Now, I could easily argue that you're going to get a lot more of that nanoparticle floating around in the air if you use a spray paint can. So, take your pick. Anyway, you can see the process works here, and it's just one more thing to put in your arsenal. I like trying different processes, and I did one recently on powder coat filling of engraving, and if you haven't seen it, I'll put a link up above here. Go watch that, and I'll see you over there. And get out there, make your world. I'll see you next time.